and acknowledgement. So the city of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabeg to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase 1792 between Crown and Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, the city of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. Okay, so just a quick rundown on how this event came to be. A few of us in the athletics department came together to figure out different ways in which we can highlight and celebrate Asian Heritage Month. So big shout out to all the panelists, big shout out to Jay, Mawad, Claire. And we basically just had a few brainstorming sessions, and we agreed that a panel would be a great way to do that, since it would allow everyone to openly ask questions and engage in a live discussion. So to start off, we're just gonna hear some opening remarks from the Director of Athletics and Recreation, Sean Bird.
Thanks very much, Ahmed. Good evening, everyone. It's great to see some familiar names and faces here with us this evening. Hope everybody's staying safe and everyone is as optimistic as I am about turning the corner with respect to COVID and returning to some semblance of normal here in the not too distant future. So I really appreciate being included tonight and having the opportunity to welcome everybody. I want to, as Ahmed has already done, but I'd like to also thank everyone responsible for making this evening happen, and to our panelists for stepping up and sharing their stories with us in this environment. And as I was thinking about preparing for tonight, I was actually reading a really interesting article, and it was written about, pardon me, the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Association. And they were interviewing their CEO, and she had a really profound statement. And I'm going to read it verbatim, and I'll make sure that I share it in the chat after, because I think these are words that we can all live by. So the CEO of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee is a woman by the name of Sarah Hirschland, and she said, some of her most difficult moments in the last 8 months at the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee have been those conversations on understanding the realities of the experiences of athletes and what they have gone through in their lives, whether that is Asian athletes, our Black athletes, our LGBTQ community who are struggling to find space in sport. It's real. Until you allow it to become real for you as an individual, it is very hard to get over the hurdle of change. I thought that was a really profound statement from the head of the U.S. Olympic Committee. And tonight, like so many of the other events that we've held over the last several months, is a step in that direction for us as a community, as a department, as a university, to take that step forward and overcome that hurdle of change. And we have very many passionate, smart, and intelligent people that can help guide us there. And I think it's events like this that make us that much better, that much quicker. So I want to tip my hat to everyone on the call this evening to say thank you for being here and for sharing your stories and helping us learn and educate ourselves along the way. So with that, Ahmed, I'll pass it back to you. But again, thanks everyone. I really appreciate your time here this evening.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sean. So before we start off, I'm just going to go ahead and set some guidelines for this evening. So first off, this discussion is going to be a safe and brave space for everyone. We're assuming that everyone is coming into this discussion with good intentions. If you're ever unsure about anything, please feel free to seek clarity when you have any questions. And lastly, I just want to encourage everyone to speak from an I point of view and share their personal experiences if you're comfortable with that. So we're just going to go ahead now, and we're going to hear a quick introduction from all the panelists of this event. So I'm going to pass it off to Anne to start it off.
Thanks, Ahmed. So I think Asian Heritage Month is an interesting event to celebrate. And I also think that there are a multitude of cultures that are very diverse across Asia. And so I'm really excited to hear these stories from our other panelists and also from all of you that may come from the various parts of Asia and what your experiences have been like. Ariane?
Hi, yeah. So my name is Ariane. Just a quick introduction about myself. I just finished my third year of kinesiology, and I'm a member of the women's basketball team here at MAC. And yeah, with Asian heritage, I'm just proud and like happy that I can be here and be able to share my experiences and my perspectives on things, and just be able to just have a great conversation with you all, and for you, everyone else that's here to like listen and just be able to get a different perspective from someone else's. So yeah, I'll pass it on to Rebecca.
Hi, my name is Rebecca, and I just finished my third year as well. I'm in the health sciences program, and I'm on the women's field hockey team. And I'm also really excited to be participating in this panel today. And I'm really thankful for everybody who came and allowed our voices to be heard. I'll pass it on to Tanya.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tanya. I'm the admin supervisor in the David Braley Sport Medicine and Rehab Center, which is in Quebec. I'm Chinese Ukrainian. That's my background. And I'm really excited as well about this discussion and the event. I'm going to send it back to Ahmed.
Okay, everyone. So for those that don't know, I'm Ahmed Shamia. I'm the head coach of the McMaster University wrestling team. I was a McMaster graduate with a kinesiology degree in 2017. I'm originally of Palestinian descent. My family immigrated to Canada when I was 6 years old. And I'm really excited to share my own personal experiences today and hear other people's perspectives as well. So to start off, we're gonna ask each other questions to each of the panelists. And each of the panelists is going to now share their experiences with regards to those questions. So first off, Ariane, we're going to start with your question for the panel.
Yeah, so with my question, I'm also just curious, just learning about other cultures. So my first question is, if you guys can share something interesting or something that others may not know about your culture or experiences in your background. Let's start with Anne.
Thank you so much for the thoughtful question. For those of you who don't know, I am from Vietnam, and our language phonetically is a leftover from the French imperial period, so which means we do utilize the French alphabet. And from that sort of imperialistic period, we've also adopted a lot of things from France. Food is heavily influenced by French. And so the famous Vietnamese sandwich, or banh mi, the literal translation for that means bread, but for us, that is a traditional sandwich that is has always been and traditionally is always made on a French baguette. And so it's always a French baguette. It is French-style liver pate, a French-style mayonnaise, deli-style meats that are Vietnamese, but are made in a very traditional French method with pickled carrots, pickled daikon, cucumber and cilantro, a little bit of sauce, always the chilies. But yeah, that's, it's something that can be eaten for breakfast. It's something that can be eaten as a snack, but it is traditionally very French. Rebecca, I'd be curious to know a little bit about your culture as well.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. I am from China, so my parents immigrated here from China, so I'm Chinese. And on all of our birthdays, we always eat noodles because it's actually called Changshou Mian, which translates to like long life noodles, because noodles are very long. We want to live a long life. But yeah, I'm gonna pass this on to Tanya.
Thanks, Rebecca. I love the long noodles too. I think I'd like to speak to the tradition part of this question. A Chinese tradition that was important to our family was the way that we honored our family members and ancestors that have passed. So our tradition was to visit the cemetery a few times a year, but always in the spring. And at our ancestors' gravesite, we would burn incense sticks, usually in sets of 3, and symbolic paper money, which signifies a prosperous afterlife for the deceased. And we place them directly in front of the gravestone. We also place a food offering at the grave closest to the headstone, and it's customary to bow, starting with the eldest person. It's about seniority. In Chinese culture, respecting your elders is of the utmost importance. To honor them, we would place chopsticks at the grave, basically to signify and symbolize their importance and their role in the family and recognize their continued spot at our table. The food that we would lay out at the grave are traditional things, always oranges, always barbecued pork, red bean paste, baos, leaf wraps, Hong Kong egg tarts, Chinese pastries, and almond cookies. The reason that we place food instead of flowers is basically food is paramount in Chinese culture because historically our people have suffered from so much poverty and starvation. Nothing is more important or honorable to our culture than a hot meal. So it's of the utmost respect to share that meal. After our ancestors have had time to receive the food offering, we would all eat the food. And it kind of symbolizes that the same food that nourished them is now feeding their younger generation, with the exception of the oranges that are left on the head of the gravestone. This is also done out of practicality because Chinese people hate to waste food. Sadly, in the past, Westerners did not want the Chinese community in their cemeteries as they thought their traditions were dirty and made unnecessary mess, but basically just because they really didn't understand the culture. So if you do happen to see an orange left at a grave or what looks to be a Chinese picnic of sorts, now you'll understand its meaning. And I'm going to ask Ahmed if he could share a unique experience or a tradition from your culture.
Sure. Thanks, Tanya. Before I share something unique about my culture, I just want to say when we're back on campus, I expect food from every single one of you. So anyway, so something unique that I wanted to share about my culture. This is a religious holiday, but it's very prevalent in Palestinian culture and many other Middle Eastern cultures, is the holy month of Ramadan. So for those of you that don't know about Ramadan, Ramadan is a month every single year in which Muslims fast from sunrise to sunset. So you refrain from eating and drinking. And basically the point of Ramadan is to put yourself in a situation of personal struggle so that you can kind of relate to what less privileged individuals go through on a daily basis, even outside the month of Ramadan. And the reason that I really like Ramadan is, although it's difficult, I find that it builds a lot of camaraderie within our community. Everyone fasts all day, it's tough, but at the end of the day, we get together, we drink, we eat food, and I just find it builds a lot of camaraderie. So that's something that I really, really like about my culture. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it off to Ariane and see what's unique about her culture.
I really like that what everyone said, and I feel like I can like kind of relate to what everyone about their culture and stuff, especially with like Anne, and like I didn't know about that about Vietnam and France. I could say about the Philippines. So my parents were born in the Philippines and immigrated here, so I was fortunate enough to be born in Canada. But I just learned that the Philippines was colonized by Spain, so like it makes sense that a lot of our traditions and culture practices are very similar, and like as well as the language is very similar to Spanish. And one of the specific ones I had in mind was something called a debut. So I would even talk to my teammates about this. They'd be like, "What's a debut?" And I'm just like, "Well, do you know what a quinceañera is?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, that's like when a girl turns 16." I'm like, yeah, it's like the exact same thing in Filipino culture, but it's for when a girl turns 18 and just to celebrate womanhood. So yeah, it was really cool that I was fortunate enough to have a debut. I was able to wear a poofy dress and just be the center of attention the whole day. So yeah, it was really awesome and it was a great experience. So yeah, thanks for everyone for sharing. I'm gonna pass off the next question to Rebecca.
Thank you for sharing, Ariane. I wish I had a debut too. My question was, how has seeing or not seeing your culture represented in your sport impacted your decision to continue with the sport as an athlete, as well as past your playing days? So I'm going to hand this question to Ahmed first.
All right, that's a great question. So I guess my answer to that would be I haven't really seen my sport well represented within my culture. The expectations in my culture is that, you're very on top of your academics. I grew up in a very fundamentalist home, and my parents' expectations were that, you become an engineer, a doctor, or something like that. And anything outside of that would be kind of taking away from the academics. I just never really saw sports in general well represented in my culture, especially something like wrestling. But it actually motivated me to pursue wrestling even further because it was an outlet for me to do something different outside of the academic load. And as you guys know, basically all kids are very rebellious. So that was sort of my way of being rebellious about the academics. So it was misrepresented in my culture, but if anything, I think that motivated me to pursue it even further. So I'm going to pass that on to Tanya next.
Thanks, Ahmed. When I was growing up, there were not a lot of local Asian athletes that I could identify with locally as well as on a global stage. It was very limited. I came from a big sports family and I was a multi-sport athlete growing up. So I guess my local role model for my culture in sport and athletics was in fact my own dad. My dad is a first generation Canadian who immigrated as a child and had to learn English and interpret basically integrate to him what was a foreign society at a really young age. Despite this, he was able to obtain a Canadian education and become a phys ed teacher in the community that he grew up in. He coached countless teams in that same community. And in addition, he founded a local tennis club on our property. So he definitely broke the mold and pushed boundaries, overcoming many hurdles with racism being one of them. I was a shy and awkward kid, so not having role models to identify with that looked like me was certainly challenging and affected my confidence. But I do think that the one area where I was able to find comfort and grow confidence was in sport and athletics. And I would say that's thanks to my dad. I think today's representation has changed with visible minorities leading their respective sports. Obviously, growing up a big tennis fan, there's an up-and-coming Canadian named Layla Annie Fernandez that's killing it. So I just think that's really encouraging for young athletes to see, and I really hope that it affects their confidence and helps them with their identity in sport. I would like to hear from Anne. Can you speak to your culture being represented in your sport? I know we talked about this in preparation about rugby quite a bit.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. And so rugby is not historically very prevalent in Vietnam. In fact, it is not quite a full union in Vietnam yet, but they are currently working on becoming a full union member for World Rugby. It's really exciting to sort of see rugby as a whole growing in the southeast part of Asia. And also back home right now, they're working with a charitable organization called Child Fund, formerly known as Child Fund Australia, where they utilize sport as a way to sort of have folks from more impoverished parts of the country learn valuable life skills and And part of doing that is learning those life skills through the application of sport, and rugby happens to be the sport of choice that Child Fund is using. It's really exciting for me to kind of see this because Child Fund has also become the official charitable partner of World Rugby up until the next World Cup. More than 50% of the youth that are involved within rugby back home in Vietnam are women. And so I think it's really exciting for them to be utilizing sport and to be utilizing this particular sport in a way to enrich their lives, to learn valuable life skills, and to be able to be in better situations for themselves. So I think that's also really exciting. Rebecca, I'd be really interested to know how you've seen this as well.
Okay, so I think when I was younger, my parents really wanted me to be a music prodigy, but unfortunately, I was both untalented at music and I was not passionate about music. And then one day, one of my friends from school decided to sign up for soccer. So I asked my parents if I could sign up for soccer instead of playing piano, playing guitar, all this stuff I didn't like it. And then what happened was I actually really enjoyed soccer. I started playing a bunch of other sports like football, and now I play field hockey. But obviously my parents were severely disappointed in me. But it was fun because, you know, I was a rebellious kid too, like Ahmed. I didn't really care. So they like never went to any of my games or practices or anything, but that's okay because I just like the sport in itself. And even though I didn't have really a role model in the sports that I was looking up to, it didn't really matter to me because I liked the sport, you know? I would like to hear Ariane's opinion on this.
So it's hard to say that basketball isn't highly represented in the Philippines because it is. It's you would say like if you're talented, Filipinos would view you as being rather a really good singer, good basketball player, or a break dancer or dancer. So thankfully, I think I can do all three, but that's beside the point. Yeah, so with basketball, it's a huge thing there. Like everyone loves to play basketball. It just brings the whole community together. Even here in Canada, like they're so prideful of it, especially if you're playing at high levels, especially in like college or university. Like they even make Instagram accounts to give you shout outs and like let you get noticed by like, all these other people and other Filipinos and all the organizations, which I think is just like a really cool thing to see because you don't see that a lot with other countries and backgrounds, stuff like that. So it's highly represented. And like what I love about it is that like we also host, not a lot of people know this, but there's like Filipino leagues or Filipino tournaments. And that's actually how I started to get into playing basketball. I started playing with an all boys team, all Filipinos. So I didn't get the ball that much, but when I did, I was sure to make the most of it. But yeah, so I would say that's how I grew the love of basketball with the sport as well as with my culture. So that was like a really cool thing that I could experience and just like continue to have grow with me as an athlete and a person. So that was a really good question, Rebecca. I think the next question goes to Ahmed now.
Okay, so my question is, how do you feel your Asian heritage has shaped or influenced your relationship or approach to sports and athletics? Would you say your ethnicity at times was a hurdle or an advantage? And can you speak and expand on that? I'm going to ask Rebecca first.
Okay, I think this is a tough question because it's kind of like a double-edged sword. There's both like positives and negatives. I think my Asian heritage definitely made me more shy to speak up about things when I was, you know, playing at games or at practices. It's just the way that I grew up, and also not having my parents there to support me in games. I always wondered like how far I could have gone if they were there to support me. But also I think it's a positive because, you know, whenever I see another Asian on a team play, we always like, you know, we're always tight like that, and we always like bond really well. I would like to pass this question on to Tanya.
Thanks, Rebecca. I love that camaraderie piece. That's really great. How I feel my Asian heritage has influenced my relationship and approach to athletics. So as I mentioned before, I was certainly a shy, awkward Asian kid growing up in a small, predominantly white dominated town. So similar to my dad growing up as a minority in that same town, I was drawn to athletics as the place that I fit in, which helped shape my identity and grow confidence. I wasn't just that awkward, shy Asian kid. I was also that awkward, shy Asian kid who was on your team as an ally. So I fit in better with sport and athletics. Obviously, there were encounters with racism and times that made me really question myself both on and off the court. But I think looking back, without building confidence and resiliency through sport at a young age, without growing physically and mentally as an athlete, I don't know that I would have been able to handle or tackle those social hurdles and challenges in the way that I did. So I appreciate that sport taught resiliency and toughness for sure. I look back on the number of hurdles my family went through, and not only in awe, but also in gratitude that athletics became that common ground that united us to Canadian culture and the community as we knew it. I think I'd like to ask Ahmed to speak about this.
Thanks, Tanya. That was, yeah, I can definitely relate to you. That was awesome. I think my Asian heritage has influenced my relationship with sport through my own personal journey in coming to Canada. So my family immigrated to Canada in the year 2000, which was the year before like the 9/11 terror attacks. And at that time, that stuff was very prevalent in the media. And so growing up, I did experience like some racism. But when I look back at it now, I actually think it was a good thing. At that time, I think because of my experiences, I was starting to become an angry kid. And I got in a lot of fights at school. And then I came across wrestling in grade 9. And it was an opportunity for me to like pick people up and slam them. And so that was a great outlet for me. And I was like, yeah, sign me up. And so through wrestling, I really learned to kind of get rid of all of that pent up energy and aggression. But it wasn't because wrestling was a combat sport. It was because of like the values that I learned through wrestling. And so that's kind of how my Asian heritage influenced my relationship with sport. Yeah, and now I'm trying to do the same by teaching my athletes about the values that you bring to your sport. I think the values that you carry as a person are completely linked to the performance that you have on the mat, on the field, on the court, whatever it is. And I think my experience with racism definitely helped me learn that better. So when I look back, I'm very grateful. Ariane, I'd like to hear what your experience is like with this sort of topic.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I feel like I can relate a lot with what Rebecca and Tanya said, just because there's a lot of pros and cons with it, especially just because as I started to play when like all women's leagues or at higher levels, I noticed, and my parents would notice, that I'd probably be one of the only few Asians on the team, or like let alone in the league. So there's definitely cons to it. But again, with sport, even when I view other athletes, I don't look at the skin colors. So I was happy that I was able to just be viewed as another player. But I guess with pros, with being an Asian and with my sport, is that like what Rebecca said, like when there's other Filipinos, especially in the league, like we make our own community, or like sometimes after games we would go get food, or especially like with the Filipino leagues, like my dad would get their contact so that we can team up and play there. So to this day, that like I'm really close with a lot of them, and like they're my closest friends. So I'm thankful for that, and just like looking forward to seeing them yearly. Well, thanks to COVID, I haven't seen them in like almost 2 years now, but I'm really grateful for that relationship that I was able to create, just because we were able to relate on that level of things. So yeah, I was really grateful for that. And I'd like to hear what you think about this question.
Thank you so much. And I think I can relate to all the panelists in some fashion or form about this. As I mentioned before, rugby is not the most prevalent back home. And when I had started playing rugby, it was not quite as prevalent in Canada, even at that point in time, for women to be playing it, let alone women of Asian descent to be playing rugby. That landscape hasn't changed too much, but I think there have been some positive steps forward. This is not a typical sport that I think my parents would have expected me to be in. There's not really a lot of other athletic folks within my family, so I'm a bit of an anomaly that chose to play sport, let alone pursue a full contact sport. And so one of the things my parents had always worried about when I was younger was, are you going to get hurt? And what is rugby? And so the amount of times that I've come home either with a broken hand, a broken nose, dislocated shoulder, the question would always be, are you done? Or if you're going to get hurt, why are you continuing? And and I think the pursuit of passion is one of the reasons why I've been able to go as far in my rugby career, and I've been able to go as far in my coaching career as I have gone. And so that has also been an advantage, but also a disadvantage. There has been a lot of racial disparity within sport. I've encountered a lot of perception bias and a lot of racism throughout my athletic career. But one of the things that's really helped is to overcome that is the passion for the sport and wanting to change that narrative and what that is, and really kind of embracing what my culture has. It's the values of hard work, it's the values of dedication and commitment. All of the things that we're stereotypically known for has really benefited me in the sport. And so when I've been able to play rugby at an international level overseas, and my parents have been able to see me wear the national crest on my jersey, I think they're weirdly proud of that, because it's not something that's very common, and certainly a bit of an anomaly in my family to want to pursue this. But I think it's a really interesting question, and thank you for all the panelists and sharing their experiences. I think this leads into a really good segue, because I think this is my question next. So the question I have for my fellow panelists is, how have stereotypes and that model minority myth, how has that played into your daily interactions inside and outside of sport? So with this question, I would like to start with Ahmed.
Okay, thank you, Anne. So I think there's definitely a stereotype in Arabic culture where, like I mentioned before, there's a high expectation to do well with regards to academics and to succeed. And I think that mindset kind of got fixed in my own brain. I think it's important to have high expectations of yourself and hold yourself accountable. But I think that mindset became so ingrained in my brain growing up that I started to become too hard on myself, and to the point where it was unproductive. So eventually, when I realized that, I kind of took a step back, learned to be a little bit easier on myself, and to be more kind to myself, which helped me be more successful. And at the same time, it was just better for me in general. But I think the model minority myth and stereotypes in Asian culture definitely played into my initial, acquirement of that specific mindset. Rebecca, I'm curious to hear what you think about this.
Yeah, I definitely relate to you, Ahmed. I feel like something that I pride myself in is like my work ethic and being able to balance things with extracurriculars and academics. But with the model minority, I guess like achieving high grades kind of became an expectation rather than something that I should be proud of. And sometimes I should sit back and be like, wow, like I did that, I should be proud of myself for that, rather than, oh, that was something that I was just supposed to do. Yeah, I'm going to move this on to Tanya.
Thanks, Rebecca. For me, I think it's tricky being biracial. I never really necessarily felt that I fit into one culture or another. I either felt I wasn't Asian enough or I wasn't white enough. I think that the model myth minority, in my opinion, creates inequality. It essentially dismisses the struggles and microaggressions that I face by making the assumption that all Asians fit into one successful mold, no matter the journey to get there, and that Asians are the exception to certain minority stereotypes, and because they have been able to find successes within their society, it must mean that they didn't have any struggles. So that's where I feel that it's something that I struggle with and find unfair. I think it's difficult personally, being of Chinese descent. You're sort of expected not to make waves, especially as a female, to be agreeable. And if you kind of buck that expectation, it's like you're opening yourself up as a target for racism. Speaking out against racism and addressing situations that I know are wrong have been difficult for me, dating from my childhood to present day community and workplace. I know I spoke briefly about my parents owning tennis courts and running a tennis academy, and I will never forget as a child my family's tennis academy sign being kicked down by students at the high school my dad was a gym teacher at. And I remember that my dad knew the group of kids that had done it, the same group of kids that constantly kicked down our mailbox, with the rest of the mailboxes on the street still standing. The thing that sticks with me to this day is the unapologetic and indifferent response from the police. So for me, this is an example of that myth. Why would this Asian man complain or speak up when he has what seems to be his own success story? So it kind of discounts the validity and strife, which is my example of inequality. Can you let us know how you feel about stereotypes and if they played into your daily interactions?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I can relate to all of the points that have been sort of brought up. Part of the danger of the model myth minority is the notion that, you know, we're hardworking and almost deserving of the proverbial seat at the table. And so it's best not to really rock the boat or to say anything, even if deep down you sort of know that there are microaggressions or there are things that are not quite right. And I think when I was a little bit younger, there was definitely things that were occurring in and outside of my athletic career and into my professional career, that you kind of deep down know that aren't really right. And maybe you don't have the tools or the articulation to really know what that is, or maybe you just don't have the courage to actually question that, or really inquire. You sort of take the no at face value, you take the answer at face value, but you're not inquisitive about it, and you're not really challenging what that could be. You know, and again, I think especially with Asian women, we're sort of stereotypically seen as petite and obedient and soft-spoken. And certainly in sport, especially in a sport like rugby, you really can't be any of those things and find success, you know. And so I think within my own journeys, I really have had to break the mold of that stereotype, and to really stand up for the things that I believe in: diversity, equality, opportunity, equal opportunity. And I think, you know, learning to, if you're sort of told no, but at least there's a justifiable reason for that, at least that incites discussion. But I think I've learned over time to not just take no at that face value. If there are opportunities to sort of understand why the no is presented to you, you know, I think it's good to sort of to challenge that notion. People may not like that quite as much because the expectation is that you will stay silent, and you should be grateful for the opportunities that you do have. But I think in just staying silent and being grateful for those opportunities, I think it actually is a little bit more harmful than it is good. And so I think it's always good for us to be genuinely curious. Ariane, I'd be really curious to sort of know, you know, how you feel about this.
Yeah, so with the model minority myth, I think it's just like such a standard, it's such a standard mindset, specifically during my mom and dad's generation. Like they grew up always thinking that. So of course, like having them raise me, they've always like kind of taught me like sudden hits about that mindset as well. So like growing up, like even when I was playing basketball, I would say sorry to a girl when she fouled me. I'm like, it's part of the game, but I don't know why I was apologizing for literally just playing basketball. So it was definitely hard because my mom would always tell me to work hard and just like keep my head down. And I'm very prideful. Like I would like to say that I'm a hard worker and I'm very prideful for that. So I hope that like everything that comes to me is because of my hard work. But I think this year especially, I started to go out of my comfort box and like learn and step out of that mindset and say no when something's obviously wrong and not right, instead of just keeping my head down and agreeing and just going with the flow. So I think it's super tough, but it's also kind of like an upbringing of a person. Like I'm growing up, I'm still in my 20s, so there's a lot for me to learn, especially from the older generations as well as with the younger generations. So I think it's a great perspective just to view and see like why it first began and why it's still happening and like how to overcome that. So that was a really great question, Anne. Thank you for asking that. I think last but not least is Tanya with her question.
Thanks, Ariane. And I really, really loved everyone's answers. I can really relate to everything they said. My question is, my question to the panelists is, knowing who you are today, your experiences, maybe your challenges and successes, your upbringing, what would you tell your kids self with respect to identity or identity in sport or athletics and owning your Asian heritage? Ariane, want to start us off?
I really like this question, Tanya, just because I think I have like so much to say about it, but I'll try to keep it short. I would tell my younger self just to be proudful of who you are, own up to it. Being Asian, it makes you who you are. Don't be embarrassed by it. Growing up, I was so embarrassed to be like Asian. It's like even sad for me to say right now, just because I'm very prideful of coming from a Filipino descent as well. But growing up, I was so embarrassed for my friends to come over and just see like my Asian looking house, if that made sense. Like my mom always had plants around and my other friends didn't have plants around. So I would tell my mom, like, don't have plants in the house, it's not cool. Or I would use whitening soap on my skin and I would like stay out of the sun in the summer, just so that I guess I would fit in. I don't even know. That was like the ideology as a kid. And it's like also embedded. Like I also see this mindset when I would visit in the Philippines. Like they just want to normal and like in a Western society growing up. So I would tell my kid self, just like own up who you are. It's awesome. You're meant to stand out. And just be proud of it. Ahmed, what would you like to say about this?
If I was to say anything to my child self, I would probably tell him not to take things too personally. If you're ever discriminated against, and don't let anyone tell you what you can or cannot do. Usually when people try to discriminate or tell you you can't do something, it stems from their own insecurity or hate. And if you believe in something and you think you can achieve something, it's really important to just trust yourself and trust your instincts. What I didn't realize when I was younger is that if you want to do something, like your potential to do that thing, your capability to do that thing, it already lies within you. You just have to find a way to kind of free that, and it doesn't really matter what anyone else thinks. So that's what I would tell my child self. I'm curious to see what you think about this, Tanya.
Thanks, Ahmed. I love that. And Ariane, I can totally relate. I remember being embarrassed of the smell of our food and embarrassed when people couldn't understand what my dad was saying because of his accent. So I get that. My answer is very similar to Ariane's too. Just take pride in being different. Different is good, and take pride in being unique, and put a spin on it that way. racism and negativity stems from fear. So have courage in speaking up, because your voice has power and education brings change. So just remember those hurdles and struggles. They're a starting point, because without them, we can't get to a place of improvement or growth. And how you want to grow and share your light with your generation, the key mechanism is cultivating changes within you. Share your knowledge and your true self with pride. Rebecca?
I love everybody's answer so far. I would probably tell all of those to my kid self. But when I was younger, I moved schools a lot. I probably moved to like 7 or 8 schools. So every 1 or 2 years, I kind of had to start over again. And because of that, I kind of never found my identity or personality, because every time I moved schools, I would just conform to whatever was mainstream at that school. You know, if there were more Asians at the school, you know, I would support my Asian heritage more. If there was more white people at the school, I would try to conform to that. So if I were to tell something to my younger self, I would just say, you know, be yourself. Like, don't go with the flow, especially if something feels wrong that other people do that's like not a that you don't stand for. Don't do it just because everyone else is doing it. Yeah, I would like to hear your thoughts, Anne.
Thank you so much. I think everyone's answer has been very enlightening. I think I can reflect on almost all of the answers in some fashion or form. Kind of knowing what I know now, if I could go back and tell my child self something, is to be genuinely curious. And that's genuinely curious about my own culture, about where I come from, what my heritage represents, and also just have curiosity about the world in general. I, like many of you, have been almost ashamed of my skin color and sort of where I've come from as a child. It's really harrowing when you're visibly different from everyone and people can point it out, and you're ashamed of, you know, bringing your ethnic food to school because people will say that it smells weird. You know, so then you end up eating just, you know, boring sandwiches because that's the most inoffensive thing that you could do. You know, but I think, yeah, genuine curiosity, following your passions, even if they don't seem like, you know, something that is of trend. You know, if you have passions for things, I think it's important to follow them, and to do so with genuine curiosity. I think that everyone's answers have been, you know, really enlightening. I think at this point in time, we are going to be heading into and transitioning into our breakout rooms. And so as we head into these breakout sessions, I would encourage you to turn your cameras on and engage in conversation. We will be in these breakout rooms for about 20 to 25 minutes or so. We'll come back for a Q&A, and then we'll wrap this up together. So without further ado,
You're
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our main room. We'll just give it another minute for folks to be coming out of their breakout rooms. and back into this main room. So I hope that you found the conversation within your breakout rooms enlightening and engaging. If you do have any other lingering questions for any of our 5 panelists, this would be the time to ask them, so please don't be shy.
This isn't a question, but Anne, I have the best place for sandwiches in Hamilton for you. Hope they're still open, but we'll go once.
I'm very excited because I'm always searching for a really good sandwich spot.
Yeah, it's the best. It's like $3 something, and they're delicious, and it's like a legit French baguette.
It's a travesty if it's not made on a French baguette.
We'll have one of our meetings there.
Amazing. So as we're waiting for folks to trickle back in, you know, if there is something that has resonated from our panel discussion that perhaps in your breakout room, it's resonated with one of the other panelists that's not in there, I would invite you to share your thoughts if you're able to. Or if you have a question for one of the other panelists who was not in your room, you can always do that at this time.
I have a question. I guess didn't think of how to word this yet. This is for any of the panelists. What would you hope to see kind of like come from this panel moving forward in terms of like either from the athletic department, from the university as a whole? Like, what do you guys think that you would like to see that would help almost like validate the experiences that you've had and like validate the experiences of like younger athletes coming in that you know that they're having? Yeah, kind of like, what do you hope that this kind of continues to become? That's kind of a loaded question.
That's a great question. Yeah, I had to take a second to think about something to say, but yeah, there's a lot. That's a good question. I would say for the first part, just have an open mind with perspectives, I guess. Because in my breakout room, a lot of people shared how it was really interesting to them and how they're able just to see, like, it was kind of not shocking, but like it was like something that you wouldn't think, and like they haven't personally experienced. So it was good for them to have someone share their experience and for them to hear it and just like kind of resonate with them, I guess. But I think in terms of the athletic department, yeah, I don't know. I don't get that much say into it as besides being an athlete, but yeah, I don't know, just like creating more inclusion, especially like, I guess these minority groups, allowing minority, like especially with the minority myth, just allowing like letting students and athletes know, like ensuring them like speak up if you have something to say. Like we know that we're hard workers, but especially when something's not sitting right with you, don't be afraid to say something. Especially in like such our diverse community. We're very welcoming, and well, I hope to think that we're welcoming, and I would like hope that others would also experience a great experience that I have so far at MAC as well. So that's my answer.
Awesome, thanks. Anyone else can hop on if they want to, if they felt like they had something to say in response to that.
I feel like what I want kind of for the future is like to have the conversation continue within teams so that eventually, you know, there will like the team environment will be like a safe space for everyone to talk about their own experiences, whether they're a person of color or if they're a woman or anything like that, just a safe space where they feel comfortable with sharing their experiences. And from this, just move the conversation to your team. Yeah.
Brianna, that's a great question. And I really love that we took a pause and some focus to celebrate Asian History Month. And I think we talked about it a little bit in preparation for this event, that not sure in what capacity, but we would love to see the conversation continue and have it not just kind of be one month, a one and done thing, but yeah, the support would be awesome to continue. Be great in person when COVID is done, to go out and support all those athletes and all those different ethnicities. So that would be something that I would like to see.
Thanks for answering that, guys.
I think from a coaching background, just ensuring that our teams have a safe space in order to have these conversations in the dialogue, and hopefully, as we're going and we're recruiting athletes to come to MAC and to come and play for our programs, that we're championing that messaging both in our recruitment and our retainment of our athletes.
I'll say something. One thing that we were talking about a lot in our breakout room that I would like to highlight to everyone was how beneficial and how nice it was to have both coaches, athletes, and admin all in one call, and just kind of talking about different perspectives, but also being on the same page about ones. I feel like it just makes things resonate a little bit more. And I think it's also a step forward to just continuing to make a welcoming environment, even more welcoming than McMaster is, and things like that. So I just think, like, even quick shout out to the Reach series by from Kwasi. Like, he's had calls with players, and then he'll do ones with coaches, and it's about the same similar topics, but it's just nice to hear from both sides. So I think doing calls like this in the future would be awesome. That's all.
I guess a comment kind of going off of that. It's nice to see a pretty, like, even just going through the group of people that are on this call, it's nice to see a pretty good split, like, between students and coaches, because, like Rebecca said, like, I want to see the conversation come back to teams. I don't see that as being like just the coach's responsibility or just the player's responsibility. So it's nice to see that we've got both engaging in the conversation. But especially I like being able to see representation from coaches, because at the end of the day, like, they're probably the person that's like staying with those teams the longest, and therefore, like, they do have a massive impact on team dynamic and things that the team values. And if a coach never brings up those conversations, it's just makes it more difficult for those conversations to start and continue and become a part of the culture. So it is nice seeing some coaches on here, and a lot of them are ones that I've seen on these repetitively. So I hope that those things really start to get, like, infused into just the way that we play sport. Like, these conversations just become a part of the way we play sport and the way we coach sport.
Great, thank you. We'll end off with a question from Shireen.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, my hand's just been up in the corner, didn't want to jump in, love the conversation. So thank you to all of the panelists. I said thank you to the ones in my breakout room, but the question that I have, and I also probably could have framed this better, but something that I think about often when trying to make spaces more inclusive or diverse is that there's usually red flags of, this is not going to be a safe space, this is not going to be good. But I'm trying to think more so along the lines of what are some green flags? So like it was already mentioned, there are coaches and student athletes and administrators here. So recognizing your own kind of levels within sport, what are some of the green flags that you see that I guess we could all learn to kind of put up and wave our green flags and say, I'm with you, I support you, and I'm here to help you. What do you look for? And if hopefully that makes sense to anyone, can you share what these green flags are?
I really like that question. I think for myself, just a great green flag would just really like any sort of response. Like I know sometimes it could be so hard to call out for help or just share the smallest thing about myself or about my culture. So just like any sort of response that you're opening to just hearing me, or that you're just embracing me, or just what helping me get through whatever I'm going through, culturally or physically, mentally, any of that would be a huge green flag for me.
I think just the willingness to engage in that conversation, I think is certainly a green flag. And I think from a head coaching perspective, I always try to have an open door policy. So athletes hopefully will feel comfortable coming to chat with me about whatever it is that they feel that they need to, and hopefully they feel that I am, someone that offers that green flag to say, yes, this is a safe space and you can come and talk to me, and vice versa. So that's the sort of culture that I want to be able to cultivate within any program that I'm working with.
Shireen, I think that my answer to, or an example of a green flag is for me just being present, whether it's at an event or a game, just showing support. I think that's my way of offering up a green flag.
I don't know if it's helpful, Shireen. I always think about whose voices are amplified in any given room and who are the outliers, and sort of choosing to notice that, I think is really important.
Thank you, everyone, for your thoughtful and insightful conversation. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Claire Werner, our Senior Advisor of Equality, Inclusion, and Anti-Racism, for a few closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Anne. And thank you so much to all the panelists. Such a great evening. I really appreciate you sort of sharing your experiences and your stories with us all. And I think that word stories kind of sums up everything. It's been at the center of everything that you've accomplished together this month, whether that's in the sort of profiles that you did of some of your student athletes, the Asian Canadians to Know series that you ran, which I really liked as well, and also in the Instagram stories that you featured in your staff and students. And I think for me, stories are such a powerful way to counteract stereotypes. And every single person has their own unique story, which is deeply connected to their personal family history. And I think that what stereotypes do is they rob you of your story, because they assign to you sort of vague group characteristics, which sort of make you feel very imprisoned and invisible. And so every time people whose stories are not generally told get an opportunity to tell their story, I think that they're doing really, really important work in terms of shattering stereotypes. And so I think that's been a great theme that you've kind of talked about this whole month. And I think some of the other important themes that you've covered throughout the month have just been that reminder to all of us about the diversity within the Asian community. The importance of representation in sport is also something that I'm thinking about in relation to this month. And also as somebody from a non-sporting background, I've learned a lot from you about how sport can really help you find your place in the world. and I also just really thought you were very generous and appreciated you sort of sharing aspects of your culture with us all. And Ariane in particular, since your video, I don't know why, but I'm a little bit obsessed with your mom's spring rolls. So I'm hoping, I'm sort of thinking about a way when we get back on campus. As far as I'm concerned, we're friends now, and you said that you share them with your friends. So look out for that. And I think just to say finally, I think a lot of work goes into planning sort of events like this. And it's a lot to have to pull it off virtually as well. So in addition to all of our panelists, so Anne, Tanya, Rebecca, Ahmed, and Ariane, I also really want to acknowledge Alex Cheng and the guy Stenellis, pardon me, who were part of the group that were sort of meeting regularly behind the scenes to make all of this happen. And that group were really well supported by staff, including Claire, Mwad, and Jay, as well as Brianna De Silva and Kiana Ferreira, all of whom helped out with tonight's event in one way or another, as well as sort of had oversight over the social media campaign that happened throughout the month. So thank you all so much for your hard work. It's been such a pleasure to listen and learn alongside you all. And it's probably premature, but I am genuinely looking forward to next year's event. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. And I'd like to take this time to thank all of you for attending this event this evening. I hope that you've enjoyed our enlightful conversation. And I hope that you are able to take away something that maybe you didn't know before. And hopefully this inspires you to continue to have these conversations well after this month and within your own teams and communities. So again, thank you so much for attending, and have a great rest of the evening.